Did you know that around 10% of the world is covered in ice? But what happens when this ice that has been here for centuries starts to melt and things that have been hidden start to come to the surface? Because all of the important glaciers are becoming liquid. But as these important glaciers continue to melt, bacteria species, viruses, animals, and infected human remains from centuries ago are being unearthed. So here are the top 15 strangest things that have been discovered in ice. 15. Ötzi the Iceman. When you hear mummies, your first thought is most likely going to be Egypt. However, in 1991, a mummy was discovered on the outskirts of Italy, and it had been perfectly preserved under a large body of ice. How did it get there? Was it intentional, or was it a cold murder case? On September 19, 1991, two German tourists on the east ridge of the Finalspitze in the Ötztal Alps on the Australian-Italian border near the Similon mountain discovered a body covered in ice. When the tourists, Helmut and Erika Simon, first stumbled upon the body, they thought it was the body of a recently deceased mountaineer because of how fresh the corpse looked. So they alerted the right authorities, who sent a mountain gendarme and the keeper of the nearby town to unearth the body. But as they started digging, using a pneumatic drill and ice axes, the weather made them give up, and they realized that it was going to be harder than it seemed. And just like wildfire spreads, the news of the strange body at the Alps spread, and 8 groups of different mountaineers gathered to see how they could bring it out. Finally, 3 days after the body was first discovered, it was extracted on the 22nd of September. It was transported to the University of Innsbruck to be studied by their archaeologists, and that was when it was revealed that the body was at least 4,000 years old. Through further research, they found that the body belonged to someone who lived around 3,359 BC and 3,105 BC. The next big question now was what killed the person found in the ice. 10 years after Ötzi was discovered, the scientists finally discovered his cause of death. A flint arrowhead was found in his shoulder, and considering how bad healthcare was during that period, it was not surprising that someone would die from that kind of injury. The Munich chief of police was asked to investigate the possible cause of Ötzi's death. Through his investigation, he determined that Ötzi's death was probably premeditated. The man seemed to have been resting at the mountainside after getting into a fight some days before, because defense wounds were found on his body. Then while he was resting, probably after a heavy meal, his enemy shot him from around 30 kilometers away, since the killer couldn't face him in a close combat. And that pretty much concludes the death of Ötzi. It was a planned murder that left his body abandoned until tons of snow ended up burying him. Because of how cold the mountain was, his body was well preserved. The discovery of Ötzi was further confirmation of life on Earth during the Ice Age. But humans were obviously not the only ones on Earth during this time, as it has been theorized that animals bigger than elephants called mammoths existed during this period. But it was confirmed when a woolly mammoth was discovered under ice. 14. Yuka the mammoth. Woolly mammoths went extinct 4,000 years ago, and although scientists have discovered different fossils at different points in time to prove their existence, Yuka the mammoth was the best preserved woolly mammoth. Yuka was discovered in 2010 along the Oyogos Yar coast of the Dmitry Laptov Strait. The carcass was found by tusk farmers before being handed over to local scientists. But it wasn't touched until 2012, and it was preserved in permafrost, which is also considered a natural refrigerator. As they started to study Yuka, they found that the mammoth was a female who died when she was around 6 or 8 years old. However, her cause of death still remains a mystery. Some scientists have proposed that she was killed by predators, but there's no evidence to prove that, as there are no signs of struggle or bite marks. Also, if she was killed by predators, she would be nothing but bones. But considering how intact her skin was, could it be possible that the scientists are looking for the wrong things. What if she was killed by something else entirely, which may determine what made other mammoths go extinct? Well, as technology advances, more things would be discovered about Yuka the mammoth. And even if much is not known about Yuka yet, much is known about these 3 Inca children mummies found buried in ice, revealing a lot about old human traditions. 13. Sacrificed Inca children. In many traditions, human sacrifice was a normal thing, and the major victims were mostly children or women. Some people were going to approach this tradition like it was a myth, since it was mostly stories people told, until 1999, when 3 Inca children's mummies were discovered. Inca child sacrifice, also called capacocha, was usually done to commemorate the death of the emperor, also called the Sapa Inca. The children were picked based on their physical perfection, so they were usually children of rulers or nobles. So when 3 children were discovered buried in ice in the Argentina permafrost, many people's suspicions were confirmed. The children were named La Doncella, La Nina del Rayo, and El Nino. The oldest of them, La Doncella, was a 13-year-old girl whose hair, body, and even internal organs were intact. Same with the other kids. But the way they all died must have been one of the most painful things in human history. Upon scientific analysis, it was discovered that the children were fed drugs and alcohol before their demise. But not just any drugs, coca leaves to be precise, which is where cocaine is derived from. This leaf was usually reserved for nobles or for ritual purposes, and while nobody knows exactly what event these kids were sacrificed for, it may help to know that the Inca people had a ritual calendar. The oldest of all the kids, La Doncella, was also called the Lulailaco Maiden. She was a virgin at the time of her death and had the highest level of coca in her system. Scientists believed that the reason for the increased coca consumption was because she was considered to be more valuable than the other kids, especially because of her virginity status. Her diet was also changed from a peasant potato diet to a meat and maize diet, probably to get her ready for the sacrifice. Out of all the children found, she was the most healthy with a good layer of fight. But unlike the maiden, the youngest of the children, El Nino, was found tied up with injuries to his pelvis and a dislocated rib. There were also nits in his hair, which shows how much he suffered before his death, and he was around 4 to 5 years old. The second child, La Nina del Rayo, who was around 6, was not looking as bad as El Nino, but she was not treated as well as La Doncella. She had an elongated skull, and one of her ears and a part of her shoulder was damaged by lightning, which happened after she was dead. They were all buried in a tomb located in the Atacama Desert. They are currently considered the most preserved mummies in human history. The preservation may not have been intentional. The same way the next strange pyramid that left scientists puzzled for years was hidden under ice. 12. The Strange Pyramid in Antarctica. When you hear of pyramids, they are usually located in Africa or Asia. So when scientists discovered what seemed like a pyramid in Antarctica, they approached it with a lot of curiosity. The supposed pyramid was discovered in 1935 by American aviator Lincoln Ellsworth in what is today known as the Ellsworth Range. It was found during the British Antarctic expedition, and because of its appearance, it was thought to be a man-made pyramid. However, that theory was thrown out the door years later when geologists studied the area and found that it was technically called a nunatak. It is simply when a piece of rock is sticking out, a glacier or ice sheet.
Huge Great Pyramids in Antarctica. They jut out of the ice and snow, and they look perfect, just like those in Egypt.
The particular rock that was found just happened to be shaped like a pyramid, which unfortunately gave some people false hope. But it's interesting that the first discoverers thought it was a pyramid, almost as if they wanted to prove that the Egyptian pyramids were not man-made, but they were proven wrong. However, the appearance of the Nunatak suggests a problem with the climate. If ice caps weren't melting, rocks hidden underneath wouldn't be peeking through. It is also not helpful that tips of rocks aren't the only things being unearthed from ice. Bacteria from centuries ago are being discovered, and it doesn't look good for humanity. 11. Ancient bacteria buried in ice. If you took biology in high school, or even if you didn't, you definitely know how harmful bacteria can be to both humans and animals. Even with the advancement of healthcare, there are still some understudied diseases. Now imagine what would happen if bacteria from millions of years ago started to surface. Well, we are about to find out as ice caps continue to melt. One of the very first bacteria found in ice caps was the bacteria from Qinghai Tibetan Plateau. It was studied and was discovered to not have any negative effect on humans and the environment. The others that were found haven't always produced the same result. For example, some researchers are suggesting that anthrax has been discovered in some frozen environments. Anthrax is a rare but fatal bacteria infection. It can be manifested on the skin as botchy spots that turn into blisters and then scabs after opening. Or it can be passed through inhalation, which then causes flu-like symptoms and coughing up blood. It is caused by the Bacillus anthracis bacterium, and although it can be treated, it is deadly. It is also disappointing that diseases that harmed our ancestors are about to become normal again. And it doesn't just stop at bacteria, as there are also some viruses being melted out of ice, and the diseases they cause are nothing short of scary. 10. Zombie virus buried in ice. When it comes to viruses, handling them is way different than bacterial infections. Viruses never leave once they enter the system, and the only way to fight them is with other viruses. But what happens when you need to fight an ancient virus that is nothing compared to what we have seen in modern days? In 2023, scientists discovered a virus in the Arctic due to the warmer temperatures that's making ice thaw. As permafrost is now becoming a temporary frost, scientists are worried that chemical and toxic waste from the Cold War could thaw and escape to become harmful to humans and animals. But the viruses that are being exposed are the scariest of it all. The scientists leading this research have found that 30,000-year-old viruses are able to still cause infections. Using viruses they got from the Siberian permafrost, they found that amoebas could still be infected, and they have since been going after viruses that can only harm one-celled organisms. But they are still worried about what would happen as ice caps continue to melt, because in 2016, around 2,000 people in a Russian village were killed by anthrax. Their deaths were linked to the melting permafrost in their region. So what message is all this passing across to us? Humans and animals are moving into more unsafe climes if we don't find a solution to the melting permafrost problem. But it's not always bad news when it comes to melting ice. Some years, 32,000-year-old seeds were discovered, and it can change our modern approach to agriculture. 9. 32,000-years-old seeds found buried in ice. Around 2012, a Russian team discovered a seed cache of Silene stenophylla native to Siberia. The seeds had been buried by an ice age squirrel deep into the group and was found amongst the bones of rhinoceros and woolly mammoths. Buried near the banks of the Colima River, 120 feet in the ground, they consisted of mature and immature seeds. The mature seeds had been destroyed, probably by the squirrel who found it to prevent it from growing in the soil. But the immature seeds still had some viable plant material, making it ready to be planted. So scientists extracted the seeds and, after carbon dating, found out that it was from 32,000 years ago. They were able to extract the tissue from the frozen seeds and successfully germinated the plants. Although it was similar to the modern stenophylla, it has a different flower shape. But how exactly can this kind of research be helpful to us? For one, we may be able to find extinct species of food, plants, or animals and resurrect them. These extinct creatures were once helpful to our ecosystem, so they may be the new balance we need. But things from the past aren't the only things that scientists have discovered buried in ice. They have also discovered items from outside space, which may explain why many things have gone extinct on Earth. 8. Martian meteorite buried in ice. In 1984, a group of meteor hunters found a fragment of a Martian meteorite in Allen Hills in Antarctica. This fragment was named Allen Hills 84001. It is believed to be one of the oldest Martian meteorites, and scientists are claiming that it was crystallized from molten rock over 4 billion years ago. Further chemical analysis on the meteor suggests that the rock originated on Mars when there was liquid water on the planet's surface. Another scientist, Vicky Hamilton, suggests that the meteorite came specifically from the Eos Chasma in the Valles Marineris Canyon. However, this analysis was not conclusive, partly because it was limited to areas of Mars that weren't obscured by dust. The meteor is believed to be 13,000 years ago, and its very existence may change how we view life outside Earth. Right now, there is water on Mars, but not in liquid form. But if a meteor from Mars 13,000 years ago is suggesting that there was once liquid water on the planet, it could lead to a conversation about why Mars is inhabitable for humans, and if it was ever, at any point, habitable, and what happened. While we continue to debate the existence of extraterrestrial life and what is real or not, what we know is real is this aircraft that crashed more than 50 years ago, but was found in good condition, buried in ice many years later. 7. Military plane from the Cold War. The Cold War was one of the worst times in human history, that many people would rather forget the history than think of the many lives affected. But as humans want to forget the history, the ice says no, and as it thaws, it reveals a plane from that era that crashed on its way to a military base. So here is the sad story of the C-124 Globemaster II. In the early part of November 22nd, 1952, the C-124 Globemaster II, also called the Old Shaky because of how it vibrated during flights, departed from the McCord Air Force Base in Washington to land at Elmendorf. But the 52 people on the flight never made it to their destination. The weather at Anchorage was bad, with dense fog and swirling snow, making it hard for the pilot to fly with external reference. He could not land at any nearby airports, so decided to just try to find his way to Elmendorf with nothing but a radio beacon receiver, a barometric altimeter, and a stopwatch. "60 miles away from their destination, the plane plummeted into Mount Gannet at full speed. Experts believe the crash landing must have caused an avalanche, which buried the plane And almost 100 years later, military personnel started attempting to find the bodies on the plane and connect them to family members. Only 9 of the 52 plane members have been identified, and climate experts are concerned that as the glaciers continue to melt, the plane would keep falling slowly down the mountain until it gets to the bottom of the lake, where it would then be harder to comb through. This isn't even the only warplane that has been buried in ice. In Greenland, a World War II plane was found, and considering how peaceful the country is now, it may change a lot about how we view the quiet country. 6. W-2 aircraft buried in Greenland. During the Second World War, Greenland served as a protectorate for the United States. So when hundreds of US aircrafts needed to refuel during the war, they always landed in Greenland, passing through treacherous snowstorms to get back to base. Many of these planes crashed, including the ones sent to rescue them. Decades after the war has ended, a special team has decided to use special heavy lifting drones to locate some of these planes, and so far, they have found one named the Lockheed P-38 Lightning Fighter, which was hidden under hundreds of feet of ice in the east coast of Greenland. The plane was part of a squadron that was supposed to go to Iceland, but was forced to crash land due to the bad weather in July 1942. The good news is that the crew on the flight were rescued, so it's nothing but an empty plane that is being found. There is really not much of an end goal to these findings, maybe except that it could be good to have relics from World War II. Who knows? Aircraft are also not the only things that have been buried in ice. There was a ship, not the Titanic, that was destroyed by ice and got buried underwater. And now, to our ultimate pick. Submarine buried in ice. Submarines were first built around 1620, but many of them sank to the bottom of the ocean, and the reason was simple. They were just not structurally fit. But after many centuries, global warming has made a dent in the permafrost and unearthed one of the world's first submarines. The explorers who took a risk in this watercraft managed to escape before it sank, but they couldn't make it back to land. We wonder how many secrets lay inside of the submarine. Definitely more than this next discovery. 5. The Endurance. The Endurance was owned by Ernest Shackleton, who was going on a mission in 1915, but was blocked by nature. He and his team, consisting of 26 men, were going to lead the Imperial Trans-Antarctic expedition when their ship, Endurance, got stuck in an ice pack. The ship didn't seem like it would endure much longer under such debilitating conditions, so the crew was ordered to retreat. They abandoned the ship, which has since sunk at least 10,000 meters into the ocean. Miraculously, all 27 crew members survived, despite having to travel through ice, water, and land. Scientists have since used over 20,000 images of the ship to make a 3D representation of it to show what it would look like without the water damage. Hopefully, people take a lesson or two from the billionaires who attempted to explore the Titanic and just stay away from Endurance. But there are some things that even though they are buried, they won't leave you alone, and that is the sad story of what happened to the reindeer population of the Yamalo-Nenets Autonomous Okrug of Russia. 4. Reindeer infected with anthrax. Earlier in this video, we talked about how climate change would make bacteria from eons ago show up and claim lives in the modern world. Well, in the Yamalo-Nenets Autonomous Okrug of Russia, they experienced an anthrax infection that killed hundreds of thousands of reindeers. It all started in 2016, when the permafrost in the area started to melt because of a sudden heat wave that hit the town. It resulted in the unearthing of a reindeer carcass that was infected with anthrax. But unlike humans, Animals usually don't know what to not eat, and if we are being honest, some humans act that way too. Anyway, the animals that fed on the carcass were quickly infected with the carcass, and just like wildfire, the disease spread. Around 2,500 reindeers were infected and died, causing a great loss to the nomadic families in the town. But that wasn't the end of the death of reindeers, as authorities believed 100,000 reindeers needed to be culled to prevent further spread of the disease. Humans also contracted the disease, and there was one fatality. What this says is that if we don't prevent the ice caps from melting, animals could become infected by diseases from ages ago, and if we are not careful, it is only a matter of time before those diseases get to us. And diseases are not the only things we may discover, as mountain ranges are also being thawed and revealed to us. 3. Mountain range buried in ice. In East Antarctica lies the subglacial Gamburtsev mountain range. With rising temperatures, the range has been exposed and it is 9,000 feet high and runs for 750 miles. But do you know what is most fascinating about this discovery? It is the fact that a whole mountain range is buried in ice. It makes us wonder how much more of the world is buried beneath us that we don't know of. Could the theory of lost civilizations really be true as the glaciers continue to thaw? But sometimes it is not the presence of mountain ranges in ice that we should worry about. Sometimes it is the stubbornness of humans who think they can go on expeditions because they feel lucky. 2. Failed hot air balloon expedition. So, in the late 19th century, a hot air balloonist, S.A. André, decided that he wanted to reach the North Pole by balloon. For circuses and other little fun events, using a hot air balloon won't be considered a big deal. However, when you want to go to the North Pole with that means of transport, then it shows that you are possibly unwise. Despite the warnings by other experts, André made up his mind and started his journey. Barely 2 days after liftoff, the balloon crashed like everyone predicted. There were no phones back then, so they couldn't call for help. The 3 men who had gone on the mission started trekking back south, but died 3 months later. Remains of the balloon were found in 1930, which was where photographs of the failed expedition were found. 1. Strange hole found in Antarctica. And finally, a strange hole was found in the middle of the Antarctic ice in the Weddell Sea. These holes are polynyas, but what made this different was the location. Polynyas are usually on the coast, but this one was right in the middle of the ice. It also wasn't a quiet experience and kept increasing in size till it was approximately the size of Switzerland. For context, Switzerland is 41,285 square meters. Some scientists proposed that it was likely caused by an intense winter cyclone, but they can't be so sure. The ice holds a lot more history than we are ready to explore. If we can't handle it, it's best to work on our actions contributing to climate change. So, what is your most radical belief to handle climate change? Let us know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more intriguing facts and news.